Good morning, everyone. We welcome you at this upcoming panel discussion about the Kurdish region in Iran, their challenges, existence, and goals. My name is Yusuf Ismail. I work at the Washington Kurdish Institute, and I would like to remind everyone that this event is co-sponsored and co-hosted by the Washington Kurdish Institute, the WKI, and also the Program on Human Rights and Peace Building at Columbia University's Institute for Study of Human Rights. I'm honored and privileged to announce that our keynote speaker is Professor David Phillips, the director of the Program of Human Rights and Peace Building at Columbia University. Professor Phillips has worked as a senior foreign policy advisor for several administrations, including during President Clinton, President Bush, and President Obama. He has spent decades advocating for human rights across the globe, but also focusing on the Kurdish issue in all four parts of Kurdistan. We welcome him, and he's going to co-chair this meeting as well, and we look forward to hearing from him and his remarks. We also have with us Mr. Arash Saleh, the representative of the Democratic Party of Iranian Kurdistan, KDPI. We have with us Mr. Salah Bayzidi, the representative of Komala Party to the United States, and Mr. Kamaran Balnour, the representative of Kurdistan Democratic Party, Iran to United States. We welcome you all. We will have very brief remarks by our guests, since we would like to make this session more engaging by you. So if you have a question, please raise your hand on the screen. I will enable your mic to ask your question directly to our guests. And otherwise, you can also submit your question during on the section of Q&A on your screen. Without further ado, Professor Phillips will start the session. Thank you. David, if you don't mind to unmute.
Yusuf, thank you very much for convening the panel this morning. And thanks to the Washington Kurdish Institute for its excellent work raising awareness about Kurdish issues in the United States and around the world. It's a pleasure to be a part of the panel with my friends Arash, Salah, and Kamran. Gentlemen, thank you for joining the discussion today. It's a privilege for me to participate and to share some thoughts with you. Iranian Kurdistan, also known as East Kurdistan or Rojhelat, is home to 12 million Kurds who are dispersed in parts of Kermanshah, Elam, West Azerbaijan, and Kurdistan provinces. The history of Kurds in Iran is a history of violence and abuse and of misrepresentations by the regime since the revolution in 1979. In return for supporting the revolution, Iranian Kurds were promised local self-government and control over natural resources and economic decision-making. They were also promised cultural rights, including use of both Farsi and Kurdish languages in education. However, the Iranian Kurds were deceived by Rojhelat Khomeini. They were barred from participating in Khomeini's Assembly of Experts. Kurds protested, chanting no referendum, self-determination first. Iran's new constitution embraced the principle of Islamic jurisprudence and Shia supremacy, while ignoring demands of Kurds and other minorities for regional autonomy. Article 15 of Iran's constitution established Persian as the Islamic Republic's official language. The Constitution promised uniform economic and social development and cultural rights to all Iranian citizens. However, Kurdish areas were denied investment and lagged behind. Kurds refused to participate in a referendum to approve the Constitution in March of 1979. When they took up arms to defend their basic rights, 200,000 members of the Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps launched a brutal counterinsurgency campaign. Those threats by Iranian security forces continue to this day. And I understand that within the past 24 hours, those threats have been renewed against Iranian Kurdistan. The Kurdistan Democratic Party of Iran, KDPI, proposed a 5-point peace plan in 1979, which was rejected by Khomeini's representatives, who insisted that they disarm before negotiations. Khomeini declared a holy war against the Kurds on August 19th of 1979. He fully rejected the concept of minority rights during a speech in December of that year, and disparaging Kurds, he referred to them as the children of Satan and enemies of God. By 1982, more than 10,000 Kurds had been killed and 200,000 displaced by the IRGC. Thousands more were convicted in show trials and executed. Social injustice still prevails in Iranian Kurdistan, which is one of the poorest regions in Iran, measured in terms of average income, literacy rates, and life expectancy. Unemployment of Iranian Kurds is about 50%. Kurds have rejected state-sponsored education in Farsi. The demands of Iranian Kurds were inspired by regional developments, including the rise of the PKK, rebellion in Turkey, and Iraq's constitution of 2004, which provided extensive rights to Kurds living in Iraq. Kurds in Iran aspire to the same rights as their Kurdish brethren in Iraq. Non-Persian ethnic groups, including Kurds, Arabs, Azeris, Baluchis, comprise about 40 to 50% of Iran's population and represent a potent political force. However, divisions between Kurdish factions and between the Kurds and other ethnic minorities have undermined their effectiveness. The Kamala Party of Iranian Kurdistan evolved into the KDP, which splintered in 1988. Despite personality conflicts and power struggles, these groups share the same goal: a democratic federal republic in Iran with local control over politics, natural resources, economic development, and cultural expression. Today's panel will discuss challenges, existence, and goals of Iranian Kurds. During the discussion, we will consider relations between various Kurdish factions and parties. We'll also explore opportunities for cooperation between Iranian Kurds and other minorities in Iran, as well as strategies for political transition in Iran, which is the overall objective that the panel shares and which I share with each of you. Columbia University's program on peace building and human rights is pleased to co-sponsor this panel with the Washington Kurdish Institute. I've gotten to know the panelists over the past year. We've had previous meetings at Columbia on January 27th of 2020 and in Washington on March 4. We made plans to broaden the circle and upgrade the level of participation. However, these plans were postponed as a result of the coronavirus, which has restricted travel. We hope to resume our work plan as soon as health conditions permit. Meanwhile, the Zoom technology allows us to interact and to further explore ideas and modalities for cooperation. Our plan is to bring the US-based representatives who are on the panel to a broader discussion in Europe in order to break the ice finalize terms of reference for a dialogue project, and agree on the way forward. As a next step after that, we plan to organize a larger conference of Iranian Kurds, including civil society representatives, scholars, and very significantly, women's groups, in order to discuss federalism and constitutional power sharing arrangements. Once there is consensus among Iranian Kurds, we will reach out to other ethnic minorities in Iran in order to deepen our contact, communication, and cooperation. Columbia hopes that confidence building will lay the ground for a coalition focused on enhanced local self-government and political transition. We're grateful to WKI for stewarding this dialogue process and for organizing today's meeting. We hope that the benefits of freedom and prosperity will inspire Iranians to work more closely together and cooperate with one another and with the United States and other interested Western countries so that Iran can shed its status as a pariah and realize the potential of its rich history and culture. Gentlemen, honored to be with you today. I look forward to hearing your remarks, having a discussion, and engaging with WKI's audience. The floor is now yours.
Thank you, Professor Phillips. Mr. Saleh? Mr. Arash?
Thank you very much. Thanks, David. Thank you very much, WKI, for holding this event. So basically, the Rojhelat of Kurdistan, aka Iranian Kurdistan, aka Kurdistan of Iran, is the most forgotten part. But not to forget that the Kurdish nationalism was originated in Rojhelat. In pre-modern era, the longest and the most robust Kurdish dynasty, Ardalans, was centered in Sanandaj in Rojhelat, from where they organized their territory for several centuries, a territory that, based on Sharaf Khan Badlisi, the most renowned Kurdish historian, sometimes also encompassed Qaradagh, Kirkuk, Kafri, Khanaqin, and Sharazur in southern Kurdistan. In the modern times, the first experience of Kurdish self-rule was established in Mahabad in Rojhelat in the form of an independent republic. Rojhelat is also the home for the oldest Kurdish political organization. The most important institutes of Kurdish nationalism, including Peshmerga, National Anthem, and Kurdish Banner, are all products of rich political culture in Rojhelat. But Rojhelat is forgotten not because it is silent. We don't hear from Rojhelat not because nothing's going on there. Quite contrary, Rojhelat is more alive than any time. It has its own way of expressing itself under the most brutal and the most insidious dictatorship mankind has seen in the past half a century. But unfortunately, when it comes to Iran, other topics and subjects such as JCPOA, maximum pressure, the relationship between the United States and Iran, they are all topics and subjects that more interest, the mass media. And when it comes to Kurds, other parts of Kurdistan are hotter spots and therefore more exciting for those who want to work in Kurds. In Rojhelat, there are both social and political struggles. The social struggle is represented by various movements inside and outside of the country, of which student movement, women movement, and an inchoate and fragile civil society, which is mainly based abroad, are parts. The political struggle, however, that shapes the context of life and activity in Rojhelat is represented by political parties. There are various political parties, but the main four have formed an umbrella organization called the Cooperation Center. That is one of the reasons that Kurdish opposition is different from the rest of Iranian opposition. We are constantly, let's say, working with each other to mend our fences, to bridge gaps between us and make it easier to cooperate and work as a body. Also, we are better organized and have, I haven't seen any opposition groups with the same level of organization. But the most important difference is that we believe no other Iranian opposition group enjoyed the same amount of constituency and support from within the society as the Kurdish political parties do. The proof is, in various occasions, we have been able to organize public strikes in which, like in all 4 provinces, Kurdish provinces of Iran, as much as 16 cities and towns participated, and that is obviously minus small towns and villages. The other reason for this belief of us is, as we speak, the PDKI Peshmerga forces are inside Iranian Kurdistan, and the people there are harboring them and helping them. And that is why they are able to stay deep inside the borders for long periods and do their activities and carry out their missions without regime noticing them. For the past 4 years, since the PDKI resumed its armed struggle, Peshmerga forces have been constantly deep inside Iranian borders. And it is not possible unless the majority of people in towns and villages consider these Peshmerga as a force of themselves and for themselves. Regime and terrorists of IRGC know this reality very well. And since they're not able to do anything inside Rojhelat and they're unable to confront us inside Rojhelat, they start blind shelling of Kurdish villages on the borders of Iranian Kurdistan and KRG, while our Peshmerga forces are deep inside the soil of Iranian Kurdistan, and we have never initiated any attacks on Iranians or IRGC from anywhere outside of Iran's borders. In the last instance, on the June 16th and 17th, IRGC opened heavy artillery fire on livestock and farms of the villagers in some areas like Alane, Choman, Haji Omaran, and Sidakan. Well, it is good to know that our Peshmerga forces sustained no casualties, but they used Katyusha rockets and long-range artillery to basically hit people, defenseless people there, to hit like livestock and farmers there. Also, I was just reading a report on IRGC announcing they have deployed significant amount of forces to the borders with Iraq, and probably some have crossed the borders somewhere near, like, let's say, Khanaqin. Pakpur, the IRGC commander, said that their target is the Rojhelati parties. But as we saw in the case of missile attacks on our bases, the silence of world and especially the lack of considerable response from United States will encourage them to step up their operations and try to further stretch their muscles in the region. If the world had shown a strong response to Iran using ballistic missiles to attack the camps of dissidents deep inside Iraqi soil a few years ago, they wouldn't have the courage to attack Saudi oil facility a little bit after 1 year later. The Iranian regime also has never stopped violence and assassinations of leaders and activists as its response to the questions at hand. They actually use violence, assassination, and killing and torture as a response to all the questions they are facing. Their infamous act of using diplomatic cover for their terrorists is well known for the international society, and it is an indicative of how this regime cannot be trusted at all. It is a shame also that European states usually turn a blind eye when Iranians use their soil for such terrorist attacks. As an instance, in the case of Dr. Qasimlu, the Austrian government shamelessly let assassins who were in the custody of their police to go and leave the country and went back to Iran. Just last week, an active member of PDKI who was a former member of our leadership survived an assassination attempt in Netherlands. Sadek Zarza was stabbed several times by Iranian who allegedly went to Netherlands like a few months ago on a student visa. We basically are waiting the investigations by Dutch police but considering the records of Islamic Republic, it is not hard to drive conclusions now. And actually, I want to mention that his family also blamed Iranians for this assassination attempt. Let's go back to the political struggle that we were talking about. The quest of this struggle is a democratic and federal Iran in which the rights of Kurdish people are preserved in a self-governance. In this federal system, we demand the Kurdish people have their parliament, their local government, and also participate in the federal government through federal bodies. We believe that the political checks and balances that this form of governance actually provide will make Iran a democracy that is pro-West, pro-United States, and pro-Israel. I believe that the expansionism and revolutionary behavior that Iran conducts outside its borders will not simply go away by replacing the current strata of rulers in Tehran by another one, as long as the root cause is not addressed properly. Well, I believe this root cause is the same sociopolitical underpinnings that regenerate Persian supremacism inside its borders, and it only can be checked through a federal system in which Kurds play their role. So it is easy to say that our cause to reach our rights inside a democratic and federal Iran is actually a cause to reach a sustainable peace in the region and to make Iran amenable to Western values of democracy and to turn it into a reliable neighbor in the region and a good friend of Israel. Look at the records of the Kurds in other parts of Kurdistan. Look how their participation in political process has helped democracy to thrive. Look how Kurds are pro-Western values of democracy. We believe that the experience of the United States to support communities, to establish some sort of self-governance will make the Middle East a better Middle East, a peaceful Middle East. The communities in Middle East are more prone to democracy, are more prone to a rational behavior than an ideological behavior. My witness is Kurds in Iraq and Kurds in Syria. We believe that such an experience can be repeated in Iran also. Thank you.
Thank you, Arash. That was a very powerful remarks. We appreciate it, and there will be a lot of questions about your remarks as well. Mr. Bayezidi, please. Unmute yourself, please.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for Washington Kurdish Institute for organizing this event. And thank you for Dr. Phillips for great remark about the Iranian Kurds. I'm trying in my talking, which is briefly, I reduced the historical Kurdish struggle in Iran. I'm trying to focus on some main points here. But I had to go back to some small historical memory we have. 41 years ago, when the revolution took place in Iran, Iranian Kurds, alongside other ethnic groups in Iran, participated for hope for free democratic Iran. In reality, in Iranian Kurdistan, never Islamic revolution took place. As a first stage, as reminding the audience, on April 4, 1979, when Khomeini proposed the Islamic Republic referendum for yes or no, the Kurds fully boycotted. So from that point, the revolution in Kurdistan diverged to, different from what was going on in the rest of Iran. The Khomeini was angry at the Kurds. The Kurds still remained peaceful, trying to resolve their issue with the central government. I just can point to, beside the boycotting, which is very civil, they, in one point in July, prior to Khomeini's declared jihad against the Kurds, the city of Mariwan, entire the city left the city peacefully when the regime's, institution trying to be established in that city. So the Kurds tried to all their best to avoid any confrontation, any military confrontation. But eventually, the Khomeini did not tolerate what was in Kurdistan. You know, while in the rest of Iran they tried to take away women's right to how to dress, Kurdistan become place for rest of freedom lovers in Iran. They were in Kurdistan, and eventually, as Dr. Phillips talked, in July 1979, Khomeini declared fatwa jihad against the Kurd. It took more than decades in military Kurd be defeated, but politically still strong. It took, by estimate, between 60 to 80,000 lives during that decade. Kurdistan still remained militarized. When some changes might happen in other parts of Iran, we still have a political execution in Iran. The Kurdistan has over 60 people on death row. So the Kurdish situation is not changed much. But what happened changed for the Kurdistan and rest of Iran, I think it was in November 2019 when the protest took place in Iran. For first time, we saw the widespread protest, which is something what the Kurds were asking for decades. The people who at this time took on the street, they were not middle class. Like in 2009, they were upset about the result of the presidential election. The people, the so-called poor people and low-class people who the regime always, saw them as their basis. These people. But what we saw, the regime in the 2 days, took a policy, shot to kill people policy. So over less than a week, 1,500 people by estimate being killed, 12,000 being detained. And it was, we at time, as a Kurds, alongside other group, we predicted, big change in Iran. Because just immediately after that protest, we saw how the regime in the end of in early January, they bring down the Ukrainian airplane. They're killing over 160 passengers. They denied. They eventually, when they saw the document, they accepted. They had to do it. So, but they said what intentional. That also made the people so angry, to come to the street. But what changed things, which I want to also talk about it, the spread of COVID-19. So little bit that halt that process of the people. I am sure because people just imagine, in November the people, that much force come to the street. In January, they burned the banners of the Qasem Soleimani across the Iran. Low participation by all standards in parliamentary election, which took place on February 21st this year. But all those things is predicted it will be very hot summer for regime in Iran. But the spread of the COVID-19, which by many standards, directly, indirectly, the regime has a hand in that. In early March and late February, the activists, they showed the video and footage of the people being, infected by virus. The regime denied. Regime's Mahan airline, which belonged to IRGC, continued to travel to China and forth and back, while rest of the world closed their airports to the Chinese, flight. The regime was working in the Middle East and picking the Chinese and taking back to China. So Iran actually became a second place beside China, to spreading virus in the region and the world. Let's be remembered in late February, the first people come to Canada, they traveled from Iran, they affected by COVID-19. From the US, I remember the first cases in New York also, a couple were from Iran, to the Persian Gulf, to the across region. So Iran, if one day international community want to have a hearing about who spread the virus, Iran should be also held accountable, but alongside China. So this is the situation in Iran. Iran is denying how many people been affected, how many but dead. But what we have data and information by late April, the people being killed for the virus is past 36,000, and infected people over 1 million. Just imagine, it's more than 1 month, half ago. And unfortunately, as a result of reckless policy of the regime, Iranian regime, beside Iran in recent days and weeks, Iranian Kurdistan being affected by a virus. And we have inadequate hospitals. There is no equipment. The nurses, the doctors suffer enormously about the regime not paying attention. We saw in the March, while Doctors Without Borders, they came to Iran, they offered to help to create some temporary hospitals, but in the few days they told them they deported them from Iran. They asking for money, when frequently the United States and other Western power offer to help Iranian government, what they needed money. They spend, by many accounts recently been published, over $16 million to their terrorist activity across Middle East, but they're asking for $5 million, loan from World Bank. So this is a situation we're going through. So we predicted, the situation is at a catastrophic level, and for the COVID-19, and the people very, very upset and very, very angry about this. I'm sure the Iranian regime, in days and weeks to come, it will have a very tough time. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bayezidi. I appreciate your remarks. We'll come back to you during the Q&A. Mr. Balnour, please.
Yeah, I'd like to thank everybody for this great meeting. Most of the opinion and points that are actually made by my colleagues is acceptable by me also. And I just don't want to repeat those words, but I would say have no doubt about Iranian government, what they do in Middle East and also in Iran. What they do, it's been their active policy since the establishment of their regime. So if I want to just put it in few words, I could probably say that execution, suppression, imprisonment, extortion, and on top of that, disinformation to pursue world to a different direction and picture Iran like something else is not existed. It's the policy of regime. More than 100,000 people are executed in Iran since the establishment of the government. And then I could say more than 18% of these executions are happening in Kurdistan, and they were Kurds. If I want to speak about reality of Kurdistan today, what is going on, it's beyond anybody's imaginations. Economically, politically, we are in a very harsh conditions. Our people suffering in one side because of the those embargoes and then other policies by the world and Iran. At the same time, Iranian government does the same thing to his own people, which is Kurds in Rojhelat, Kurdistan. So therefore, we have a very dire situation. Economically, they're suffering a lot. There is a issue in Kurdistan, it's called Korbar, for example. This Korbar, I have some statistics that says only last year, 79 people died just to make a few dollars a day. 176 people got injured, same thing. And then these guys who they injured, they cannot even go back to work. So these guys are carrying about 100 to 150 pounds of goods on their shoulders, and they're crossing borders to make few dollars. And then there was some reports saying that the only reason the Iranian government does that to these Kurdish people in our region, just because 95.5% of the goods smuggled to Iran, it comes from the official borders. Now, there is only 4.5% goods coming from these areas which Kurds lives between the border of Iran and Iraq and Iran and Turkey, and actually carries by the Kurds. So that's why these guys, they want to make sure 100% of these goods smuggled to Iran, it actually controls by the mafia of the regime. So they don't want to have any Kurds benefited from these points. And now, if I want to say something else about what's going on, what's the reality of in Kurdistan today, I'd like to go ahead and give you some examples of how many people have been executed. In entire Iran, 2019, 690 people executed. So between them, 280 people were Kurds. So if I want to give you a percentage of how many Kurds have been executed, while we are like 10 to 14% of, we are 10 to 14% of the population, but we lost about more than 45% through these executions. So what they do, regime systematically killing, execution, imprisonments, they're trying to control this area inside Iran and outside. As Kagarash emphasized, what's going on in the outside of the border, you can see that just today, it's been reported that there was a lot of heavy guns and personnel actually deployed to the border to probably control the movement or have some pressure on the KRG probably, and there might be something else, and then this is what's going on outside. So I just want to at the end say that inside and outside Iranian government, it's a regime that its acts and the way they act, it's beyond anybody's imagination, but at the same time, they're trying to put a better picture of themselves to the world. Thank you, Yusuf.
Thank you, Mr. Baralnoor. Professor Phillips?
I want to react to some of the comments that you've made. Firstly, and most importantly, I want to express solidarity with the remarks that Kak Kamran has provided. We join you in deploring the execution, the torture, the disappearances by the regime of Iranian Kurds. These criminal activities have to stop, and those responsible should be held accountable. Arash, you mentioned the Cooperation Center. It's a very positive development that the four parties are working together, that there's a structural mechanism for exchanging information and fostering cooperation. And we welcome additional information about the Cooperation Center and how it can function with Columbia University as our discussions about political transition progress. Kaksali, you and others talked about federalism, and I would just want to underscore an important point. Federalism is not necessarily a uniform approach to power sharing. There are elaborate mechanisms called asymmetric federalism, where different regions and provinces are given differing degrees of local control over their politics, their economy, and their culture. It's for that reason that we feel the dialogue between Iranian Kurdish parties is important, but also we recognize the importance of involving other Iranian minorities, because each view may have a different perspective on the degree to which federalism would decentralize and devolve powers. So the project that we have embarked on with you needs a partner. The four parties have been our partner. We need an institutional counterpart, and the Cooperation Center is invited by Columbia to work with our team of experts as we explore federal arrangements and asymmetric federalism, because ultimately we need to have a new constitution, a new system for the rule of law, and as Kak Kamran has made clear, accountability for the current crimes and transparency about recent aggressions, including troop movements by the IRGC towards Iranian Kurdistan today and as we speak. So I look forward to continuing our discussion. You can count on Columbia as your partner, as we define the modalities of communication and the technicalities of federal power sharing.
Thank you, Professor Phillips. We have quite, actually more than 8 questions so far. But before I open the mic for few attendees, there's one question that is kind of brief. That's what we look forward to, is about why the Iranian Kurdish parties do not unite their fighting force under one umbrella. And that's a question maybe for the panel. Mr. Arash, you can start with it.
Okay, thank you very much. Thanks for the opportunity. Basically, we are currently doing that. This umbrella organization, the Cooperation Center, is working on that, and there have been some discussions in the Cooperation Center. We're trying to actually make it possible, make it easier for Peshmerga forces, the headquarters of Peshmerga forces, to actually cooperate with each other and coordinate their force and missions inside Iranian Kurdistan. So basically, it is, I believe, a step-by-step endeavor, and we are going to actually reach that goal, I hope.
Professor Phillips, would you like to comment on that?
Yes, it's important that the Cooperation Center develop practical forms of cooperation, but we also have to recognize that the Kurds in Iran are under constant pressure. And even as we speak, there are aggressive acts that are foreseen against the people. So one of the functions of the Cooperation Center can be to monitor and report to the international community crimes that are being committed. Columbia University has an excellent communications program. And if there are reports that are prepared by the Cooperation Center, we're ready to work with each of the parties to help disseminate and publicize the facts so that the truth can be known around the world.
Thank you, Professor Phillips. We'll open the mic. The next set of questions, maybe Mr. Baizidi and Mr. Kamran can take. We'll open the mic for Ambassador Peter Galbraith.
Here we go. First, I'd like to thank you all for this excellent panel. And I'd particularly like to say a word about my friend David Phillips, whose involvement with this cause goes back at least to 1990 and the Congressional Human Rights Foundation, and trying to help make Washington more aware of these issues. I followed the Iranian Kurdish question. In fact, in '92, I was up in Kandil in April with Sadiq Sarafkandi. We had a wonderful discussion and dinner, and just a few months later, he was murdered in the Mykonos restaurant in Berlin. So this is certainly a long history. But my question is, are there any Iranian opposition groups, and I don't mean from ethnic minorities, but shall we say from the Persian community, or predominantly Persian, with whom you can cooperate or who are supportive of your agenda? I think of the darling of the right wing in Washington, which is the Mujahideen Khalq. But I remember in 1991, because I was in Iraq during the uprising, they were the ones who supported Saddam and actually helped put down the uprising and helped the Iraqis retake Sulaymaniyah, killing hundreds of Kurds. So they obviously are not credible. Is there any group that might be credible as a partner, again, not among minorities, but among mainstream, not mainstream, but from the Persian, the largest ethnic community in Iran, namely the Persians?
Thank you, Ambassador. Mr. Baizidi.
Thank you, Mr. Galbraith. For the question, I think, yeah, we as a Kurdish political party, beside creating Center for Cooperation of Iranian Kurdish Party, we have tried to go for 3 levels, unity among the Iranian Kurds, and then because Iran is a multi-ethnic country, you know, many people call it the last remaining empire in modern world. So since 2005, you know, we have worked the organization umbrella called the Congress of Nationalities for Federal Iran, which is, I think, this include the Kurds, Kurdish political parties, Azeris, Baluch, you know, Turkmen, other group, which is good, you know, it show how. And then recently has been some primary steps to, beside Kurdish unity, you know, cross-ethnic groups, be include Iranian Kurdish Persian parties, which is unfortunately they are very fragmented, you know, mostly they're elites, you know, or some of them do not believe even at the limited right to Kurds like federalism or for sharing power, you know. So, but one of the organizations I can call recently last year it was published, the Solidarity for Freedom and Equality in Iran. This is also the working, but I believe we cannot 10 to 12 million Kurds, you know, cannot bring down this regime, cannot we do change, you know. So we have to need to go to try to create cross-ethnic, you know, included the Persian party. So, but they should be understanding each other, you know, try to have a dialogue, you know, how the future of Iran be look like. So I think it's very important, and those steps already been started.
Thank you, Mr. Bayzidi. Mr. Balnour, would you like also to comment?
Well, as Kak Salah said that it's not easy to actually create an environment to have everybody on one table and then talk about one goal. Unfortunately, the current regime, just like the ex-regime of Shah, they are their common goal to suppress Kurds and denying their rights. They have the same goals and they have same common ideas. And also, it's not easy work with the other factions like such a Mujahideen or probably monarchists in Iran. Unfortunately, they are so tied to their ideas that there is a unified Iran, and they think that kind of situation that we have right now, it's a threat to separate Iran, which we strongly believe that this is not a threat. What we try to do, we try to actually create an environment to live in and be equal with the other minorities, or especially Persians. So that, therefore, we deny that always, but so far it's not acceptable by them. Also, what the program by Dr. Flip right now, I think this could be another light for everyone to gather around this federalism idea, and then we can have this idea, spread this word between other minorities. Once we all the minorities actually having the same idea, this kind of federalism is good for Iran. I think Persians, they have, I think they have no choice to actually cooperate with this idea. And then also strongly, I believe that the next Iran probably would actually choose their goals and futures by referendum, which also this idea of federalism can be actually taught between all these minorities, and we can get prepared for it.
Thank you, Mr. Balnour. I will open the mic for Julia Anderson. Julia, the mic is yours if you have a question.
Hi, yes, thank you. Can you hear me? Okay, so I want to say thank you for everybody. Your ideas and thoughts were really interesting. I have a question because I understand that most of the Iranian Kurdish parties are, fundamentally exiled in Iraq, and correct me if I'm wrong. And just a couple days ago, I read that that Turkey and Iran have been coordinating attacks in the KRJ, going against, of course, international law and sovereignty, calling it as a sort of self-defense against Kurdish parties. Now, many of you said that of course, the international community isn't reaching out that much, and also the European Union is closing a blind eye, and as well NATO, is leaving much of its bases, as well as the United States, from Iraq and Syria. So my question is, what future prospects do you see, like in terms of the negotiation with, the European Union, Iraq, other neighboring countries, and the United States, for example, for the Iranian Kurds?
Thank you, Julia. Mr. Arash, could you take that question, please?
Of course. Thank you very much. So basically, no, we're not basically mainly based in exile. The main part of our organization is inside Iranian Kurdistan, which is the clandestine part of organization. Only the leadership and the Peshmerga forces, the leadership is outside, it is in Europe and in Iraqi Kurdistan, and the Peshmerga forces is on the borders. And the main part of our parties and our organization, at least I can speak about PDKI, is actually inside Iranian Kurdistan in a form of the clandestine part of the organization. Well, in terms of negotiations, well, look, I mean, it is imperative that United States, Iraq, and Europeans understand this fact that Iran is using us as a subject of, experiment. They have repeatedly done that in the past. They actually attacked us with missiles. They attacked our bases. They attacked basically Iranian Kurdish dissident camps in Iraqi Kurdistan, and the world basically remained silent. And that encouraged them to repeat that in Saudi Arabia, in the case of Saudi Arabia, they encouraged them to repeat it in Iraq again and to actually further stretch their muscles there. So that's why I believe it's basically beyond the question that it is imperative for the United States, especially, to see the reality there and step up and basically do something about it there. We are trying to convey the message, but I'm not sure how much they are serious in this.
Professor Phillips, with your experience, how could the Iranian Kurds approach, and as Julia asked, to negotiate with the United States, with the European Union, and with the international community?
When you reach out to U.S. policymakers and the international community, we all know that there is strength in numbers. A unified position and a coherent political plan will bring people on board. You also have made it very clear in your remarks that you're not recommending the breakup of Iran, but rather the democratization of Iran. So having a unified position, putting forward political plans, and emphasizing political transition that would transform Iran in its entirety from a religious autocracy into a pluralist democracy are important points to make. You can do that through your oral interventions. It would also be important for the Cooperation Center to adopt a statement that makes all those points crystal clear. And if you, in your capacity as party representatives, want to work on such a statement, we'd be pleased to provide some legal and editorial assistance to your efforts.
Thank you for that. We have a lot of questions, but I could tell our attendees that if we couldn't take all of it, we have more than a dozen of questions. I will make sure that your question will be directed to the panel and they will get your response via email in case if your question is not addressed here. Philip, feel free to ask your question.
Hi guys, thank you so much for giving this wonderful talk. I just have a very simple question. Given Biden's support for Kurdish political aspirations in the past, particularly in Iraq, what hope do you have that Biden will take the Iranian Kurdish issue more seriously? And what would you like to see out of a Biden presidency in regards to Iranian Kurdish policy?
Thank you, Philip, from FTT. Mr. Bayezidi, could you comment on that?
Yes, I think, in my opinion, the Kurds, for this matter of the U.S. election, they should remain bipartisan. Because we know how during election the candidates, they say, they say a lot of things, but when the policy, as Dr. Phillips said, partially is related to us, our unity. Dedication to the plan, a coherent plan which is produced, and I I don't know. Mostly it depends how situation is go, because what we saw, maybe some policy the current administration we saw as a positive step, like designating IRGC as a terrorist organization, putting maximum pressure on Iran, not necessarily because we agree mostly with that much level embargo Iran is good, but there is no other alternative. The other alternative do nothing. So I leave this policy to the next administration how to look, and we don't know how the world, the post-COVID, if there is post-COVID world, how does it look like? We already see the dictators around the world, they're trying to score what they couldn't do in the previously, China doing to the Hong Kong and maybe Taiwan, and so other authoritarian dictators around the world. So I think, my opinion, we should wait. There's dust down the election. Which they choose. We choose next. Administration. But see how the world look like. But mostly, I said, is also dependent on us how Iranian Kurds, be united, and they asking something, as Dr. Phillips, said, they're asking for democratic federal Iran. So this is logic, and this is can be done.
Mr. Balnour, what would you say?
Well, I think Mr. Biden was part of the administration when actually JCPO took place. And then we actually connected with most of these officials in the administration of when Mr. Obama was president. And we emphasized these points that while you guys go and negotiating this deal, there should be some kind of other negotiation besides, such as human rights, and even the constitution of Islamic regime right now actually conveys some points that could be acceptable by us, such as I think, if I'm not mistaken, Article I think 14, which is really great for us. He can go ahead and say something like that in the public, that if this is he can do for us, at least based on actions, we can see that, and then we already supported these actions before. So I think it would be a good idea. We want to see what he want to say about the future of Iran. We just want to say that in public. Once we saw that, we are going to support it, obviously.
Thank you. Professor Phillips, not to change the main topic here to domestic politics of the United States, but what would you say about Mr. Senator Biden's or Vice President Biden's approach to Iran, if he wins?
So two important points. Of course, we all recall Senator Biden's editorial with Leslie Gelb on power sharing in Iraq. Many of the principles that were described in that article are applicable to Iran. So I would study that editorial and extract from it specific language that was used for Iraq, which is applicable to Iran. I'd also like to share that the platform committee is drafting language for the Democratic Party on potential hotspots that a Biden administration will have to address. And Iran is surely on that list. It would be important to submit some language to the drafting committee that specifically addresses your concerns as Iranian Kurds. And I'd be pleased to work with you on that language and to help you submit it to the right authorities.
Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Phillips. Maybe we'll have time for another question. So there's a question about your efforts, the party's representatives in Washington. What are their daily, weekly efforts to raise awareness of this issue, of the Iranian Kurdistan issue in Washington? Mr. Arash?
Well, basically, we're trying to approach the administration, Congress, civil society, papers here to raise the awareness about the Iranian Kurdish issue and the political situation in Iran, to have an effect, to have basically attention of society and the government here in the United States. We're doing so by basically contacting people here. But can I actually answer one or two questions that I saw in the questions, because one or two of them I believe were addressed to me. The first one was why Israel is important. Well, because of two main reasons. In the case of Iran, it is a criteria that measures tolerance, that measures the level of supremacism and expansionism in the dominant discourse of the political groups. So it is very important to see that it is very important for us to see as a future in Iran that tolerance is the main base of it, that does not follow supremacism and expansionism outside. And the other reason is because we believe that the main, basically, the main power that prevented a viable peace in the region was Islamic Republic of Iran and has been Iran. So a kind of viable peace for the region basically will lead to a better life here in the United States, also in the rest of the world. So that's why I believe that the case of Israel has both merits for us as Kurds in Iran and merits for Western people. And also the other question about why Iranian Kurds do not basically feel that they belong to Iran, despite the fact that their language is close to Persian. Well, I would say why Swedish and Norwegian people do not feel that they belong to each other while their languages are so close. Here, the problem is recognition. You know, look at the history of Iran. The history, when you look at it, Iran has been shaped in a form that has its structure actually has excluded us and has denied us from our basic rights. That's the main reason that basically our identity has been shaped in a form that we believe that we are in danger, and only a mechanism based on self-rule and based on federalism and a deep democracy in Iran can save us. Thank you.
Thank you. Before we end this session, I would like for our guests to have a brief remark, closing remarks, and then Professor Philip will have his own remarks. So, Mr. Balnour.
Well, thank you for inviting us. I'd like to thank Mr. Philip for his great comments and his cooperation with Kurds. I think this is an honor to work with you. And then I hope one day we create an environment that all Kurds are free and living in a federalism.
Thank you. Mr. Bayezidi, would you like?
Yes, so I would like to thank you for organizing Washington Kurdish Institute, and again for Dr. Phillips, participation and remarks, and his offer to continue with as the Iranian Kurdish Party to, to make a proposal to the international community and the United States. We hopefully, we acknowledge we are living through a turbulence time. We don't know how the world is going to look like in a couple of months, but we hope for the best for free, democratic, and federal Iran. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Saleh, closing remarks?
Thank you very much. Thanks, WKI. Thank you, Columbia University. My message will be, it is important for United States to realize that it is in their direct interest to support us Kurds in Iran. It will be in the direct benefit of region to support us in Iran. It will be in the direct benefit of peace if they support us Kurds in Iran. And basically, it is very important to realize that Iranian Kurds can actually repeat the same experience as Iraqi Kurds and Syrian Kurds and provide an example of democracy and tolerance in their region for the rest of Iran.
Thank you. I would like to recognize a good group of think tankers in this event. I much appreciate them being here, including from Middle East Institute, including from the FTT, and some professors from different universities. I would also just want to repeat that those questions that we were not able to answer, I will forward them to the representatives and to this panel, and I could promise you that they will get back to you with some answer, because we didn't have much time basically to take them all. Professor Phillips.
Gentlemen, thank you for your excellent presentations, and thank you to you, Yusuf, for able moderating, and WKI for its leadership in this issue. Imagine a pebble that is tossed into a pond. Agreement among the Kurds on federal arrangements would be the first concentric circle. The second circle would broaden the agreement to include other ethnic minorities. We're stronger together and with community. And the third circle involves Persian progressives with whom we can have a dialogue and potentially collaborate. It's only by building coalitions that we're going to be able to achieve our objectives. The US government should more strongly support your efforts. With WKI, Colombia is prepared to convene briefings on Capitol Hill. Certainly, people like Peter Galbraith and others can advise this process. I just want you all to know, and I want to send a message to the Kurds of Iran, that we stand in solidarity with your efforts. It's a noble cause, it's a just cause, and working together and cooperating, we can realize the goals that we share. So this is a journey. Over the course of the coming months, we'll continue our dialogue. We already have a small circle of participants planned for later this week. You're not alone. We stand together, and we stand with the Kurds of Iran.
Thank you, Professor Phillips, for being here. It was truly an honor to have you with us, really, and we appreciate everything you have done in the past and continue to do so. Thanks once again for the speakers, for the great guests we have, and at this point we will end this session. Thanks again.